Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We have a great turnout. Another highly populated Turning Point USA event. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Yeah. Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, because many people are probably new to this campus, Turning Point USA is basically a pro-freedom, pro-capitalism, pro-America club. All three great things we all love. How many people love America? Yeah? Yeah. Who loves capitalism? Yeah. And who loves freedom? Yeah. And we're a nonpartisan organization, so if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever-tarian, you can join our club. We'd love to have you have a dialogue, have a discussion. That's what we want to do here tonight. We're not about divisiveness. We're not about shutting anything down. We're here to have a free-flowing conversation, all have some fun. So everybody want to do that? Yeah. If you're interested in doing that every week, we have weekly meetings in Willard 162 every Thursday, 7 p.m. So tomorrow night, don't have anything planned, please stop by, and we'll have a good time. And of course, our club has other big events coming up. In November, we have Mayor Matt Morgan speaking. He's a former WWE wrestler, big superstar, American Gladiator superstar, and pretty cool guy. So if you're interested in that, that'll be coming up. The Great Lakes Regional Conference is also coming up, so sign up for that. We're a lot of cool speakers. And of course, the Student Action Summit in Florida. You get a nice, cool break from the winter in nice, sunny Florida, and you get to see Donald Trump Jr., Ben Shapiro, and many more big names. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for coming out once again. Since our club is pro-freedom, one of our central pillars is freedom of speech. One of the best things ever about this country. How many people love freedom of speech? Yeah. As many of you probably already know, free speech is under attack everywhere, especially on a college campus. So we want to honor freedom of speech in the best way possible. We want to honor this amazing First Amendment right tonight by having a discussion with popular political YouTubers who have been censored online by big tech companies. So without further ado, let's get a little taste of our first speaker.
Today, we're going to be looking at Hunter Avalon. This is a channel that I absolutely despise.
I'm telling you to shut the f up because I don't like you and I think you're a piece of for being here.
So why do you not like Donald Trump? From my show, you can see I do actually like Trump, but I'm very curious to hear your opinion.
I believe that being pro-gay is actually really conservative.
Being pro-gay is actually conservative. Shut the f up, idiot.
Refusing to vaccinate your child is child abuse.
Go to Hunter Avalon's page and flag all of his videos.
I was given no warnings and I didn't even receive 3 strikes. My channel was just completely terminated. I'm back. I am transgender. Stop caring if people pass or not. Stop celebrating transgender people just for existing, and stop gatekeeping who is trans and who isn't.
He comes out and says what he has to say, and guess what? I agree with just about 100% of whatever he has to say.
Vaccines can cause autism. Ironically enough, it's the idiots who peddle this myth that appear to have mental health issues. This isn't what it looks like. In 2017, everyone's favorite dirt mound, Lena Dunham, posted a now deleted tweet claiming you don't need a father. Lena, look at how you turned out. Clearly, you needed a father. Your favorite white boy is telling you the truth about black people.
From the very start, I've said that for a lot of transgender people, sex change operation is good and necessary for them. I've made countless videos defending LGBT people against the oppression and the horrors they experience under Islam, and I have raised awareness of this to hundreds of thousands of people. Quite honestly, I do feel that I've done more for the LGBT community than you, Alyssa.
All right.
That's hilarious. No, I have a response to that.
Hunter Avalon, you are just brilliant.
That dude is cool, and he gets so much hate.
What's one right that a man has that a woman doesn't?
People hate that the man can come out and say what he has to say. He has valid points.
You would rather me be quiet about the horrors the LGBT people face under Islam than dare to speak about it because you don't want me to look Islamophobic.
What's up, everybody? It's your favorite gay-looking straight boy, Hunter Avalone.
So, everyone, please give one of the youngest conservative YouTubers and honorary member of the Ban from Twitter Club the warmest welcome you can for the guy who loves to hate, Hunter Avalone!
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. And thank you to Turning Point USA for hosting this wonderful event. Today, I want to talk about censorship. And more specifically, how we... Can I take this off? I'm sorry. Yeah, can I hold this? That way I can get passionate. Today, I want to talk about censorship, and more specifically, how we conservatives are being censored online. Conservative channels are quickly becoming obsolete on YouTube, and white men are instantly demonetized. In fact, Fox News has found that if you even mention Trump in a positive way online, you have a 99% chance of being banned from the entire internet. Obviously, guys, it's okay, I'm exaggerating. I am exaggerating, but there are far too many people who genuinely think this way and expected this kind of a speech from me tonight. But you may be surprised to know, I think there are many more layers to this discussion about big tech censorship. Conservatives are not being censored online the way big conservative names have claimed. These big conservatives encouraging you to play the victim and blame the fact that you're a conservative for any difficulties are lying to you because they only care about fame and money. I'm against playing the victim, and far too often conservatives are quick to play victim anytime their social media accounts fluctuate. The topic of censorship is a controversial one, and I think there is certainly big tech bias against conservative voices on specific social media platforms, but this is a nuanced discussion that can't be summed up as easily as, yes, conservatives are being censored online. You may have come here expecting something entirely different from me. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are people outside right now protesting my speech. And I can assure everyone protesting me, I'm not a Nazi, all right, guys? And any protester claiming I am one should probably spend more time studying history instead of protesting someone they've never even listened to. So I'm not gonna tell anyone what they want to hear. Instead, I wanna look at what the facts say so we can all stop living as victims and instead work to further our conservative beliefs across the online sphere. So this is the truth about censorship. I want to begin with my first point, censorship, what is and is not happening. Anytime the discussion about big tech censorship arises, you're quick to hear right-wing pundits invoke freedom of speech. But big tech censorship is not a free speech issue. Even if all claims of censorship are 100% true, this would still not be a free speech issue. The First Amendment protects us from government infringing on our freedom of speech. Facebook, along with all the other social media platforms, are free to ban people as it's a private company. In the summer of this year, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote for a divided 5-4 court that a private entity that opens its property for speech by others is not transformed by that fact alone into a state actor and therefore is free to censor users. Another common conservative argument is that social media platforms are behaving as a publisher rather than a platform. This is not true either, as social media platforms have community guidelines which are within their rights to enforce, where publishers are held legally responsible for the content. Publishers also approve all material before it's published, and with 300 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute, it would be ludicrous to suggest it's even within possibility to approve all material before it's published, making YouTube, along with other social media sites, a platform. Now, although big tech censorship isn't a free speech issue, it doesn't mean censorship is somehow a good thing. But far too often, conservative voices oversimplify the issue of censorship, either deliberately in an attempt to garner victim points or due to assumptions based on misinformation. Many of you know that I'm a conservative YouTuber. I am one of the largest conservative channels on YouTube, and I'm also one of the youngest conservative content creators. If anyone has an understanding of YouTube as well as the censorship on the platform, it's me. Back in the month of April, I woke up one morning to discover something shocking. As a new father, this was something that was especially terrifying for me. I woke up to find out that my YouTube account had been terminated. I had over 630,000 subscribers one day, and poof, the next day, my entire account, along with nearly 100 million total channel views, was gone. I'm sure you can guess that day was a very stressful one. I support my wife and my new baby on the revenue I earn from YouTube, and to have that suddenly stripped away without warning was really, quite honestly, devastating. Thankfully, after 7 painful hours, my channel was reinstated. Now, this would be an easy scenario for me to blame censorship. Here's a perfect chance for me to claim I'm a victim due to my conservative beliefs. However, the fact that my channel was so quickly reinstated is proof against conservative censorship rather than for it. Far too often, conservatives quickly blame the fact that they're conservative for any online penalty, when in reality, there's a much higher correlation among conservatives and edgy content. We conservatives don't care about being politically correct. If someone is acting like a retard, we're fine just calling them out about that. Because of this, we also tend to cross the line and break the rules more often, resulting in more online penalties. It's a conservative value of mine to take personal responsibility, and an instance such as this is really no different. Now, on the flip side, I agree that YouTube has room to improve, and you and I may not like the YouTube rules and guidelines, but if you get pulled over for speeding, you may not like the fact that the speed limit is only 30 miles an hour, but that doesn't change the fact that these rules exist and breaking them will result in consequences. It's also important to note that it's not in YouTube's best interest to terminate conservative channels. Lost my page there. YouTube is a business at the end of the day, and they want money. So the more conservative channels, the more users being brought to their platform, the better. And I think we all have capitalism to thank for that. Lastly, these issues are not exclusive to conservatives by any means. Over my time on YouTube, I've seen apolitical channels get terminated by mistake repeatedly. I've seen LGBT content creators file a lawsuit claiming censorship and discrimination, and I've even seen the Democratic candidate Tulsi Gabbard file a $50 million lawsuit claiming censorship. So if big tech censorship exists, it's happening to everyone. All right, YouTube is like communism. Everyone suffers equally. Lending further doubt to the sweeping claim that conservatives are constantly censored online, Facebook's best performing pages skew conservative, data from Social Media Monitor NewsWhip shows. In February, Fox News received significantly more interactions than any other publisher on Facebook, with more than 45 million engagements. The UK's conservative-leaning Daily Mail came second, followed by Cuck News Network, CNN, and right-wing pundit Ben Shapiro's website, The Daily Wire. So if big tech is targeting and censoring conservatives, they aren't really doing a very good job. Media Matters, a left-leaning organization, tracked 463 Facebook pages that actively posted about politics to an audience of 500,000 or more followers. Over the course of the 6-month study, right-leaning pages had 51% more interactions than left-wing pages. Finally, a study from The Economist found no evidence of ideological bias in Google's search results. We're the side that claims to value facts over feelings. But you won't hear this data from any other conservatives because the big name conservatives are operating on their feelings in a cheap attempt to push a victim narrative. As conservatives, we constantly criticize our society for creating a culture that rewards the victim, yet too many conservatives nowadays are profiting off that exact culture they claim to be against. Big conservative companies like PragerU have the audacity to sue YouTube because some of their content doesn't appear when YouTube is in restricted mode, a mode usually turned on at libraries or schools to block content that's not necessarily safe for work. However, a researcher at the think tank Data and Society found algorithmic reasons those videos might have been flagged. One video began with the word rape, which could have been automatically detected. Many of their videos deal with sensitive topics such as the Holocaust, and most, if not all, controversial videos, regardless of political slant, are not available when YouTube is in restricted mode. But to many people, these facts don't matter because there's currency in victimhood. So I've explained the nuance around censorship and how the claims of many conservatives are unfounded. So this brings us to my second point. Is big tech censorship happening to conservatives at all? Yes, but not in the way that you've been told. I don't think there's conservative censorship on YouTube specifically, but I do think at the very least, bias against conservatives exists on Facebook and certainly on Twitter. Although there's no way to test the validity of these claims, a former Facebook insider who was interviewed by Project Veritas said the social media giant has allegedly developed an entire set of tools that it frequently uses to suppress conservative voices and target outspoken right-leaning users. I do believe these claims are a bit sketchy, especially according to the data I previously cited on right-leaning Facebook pages outperforming left-wing pages. Regardless, here is potential algorithmic bias, yet conservatives don't focus on these potential real issues and instead peddle anecdotal evidence to champion their claims. Twitter is also notorious for shadow banning and flat out suspending conservative voices. I think this boils down to the fact that Facebook and Twitter are operated by liberals. Many times the decision to ban a user comes down to a human reviewer where there's room for human error as well as bias. But again, it's not in the company's best interest to censor or ban anyone. And even in instances where certain conservative content creators like Diamond and Silk have been censored, the error was acknowledged by the company and reversed. So although censorship may not be the right word, I do think political bias exists and can negatively impact the decisions made by big tech when it comes to conservative content creators. Finally, we come to my last point, why it's easy to believe big tech is censoring conservatives. Although conservatives should take personal responsibility and stop playing the victim, big tech needs to do their part as well. According to the Washington Post, research reveals one likely reason why these claims of censorship continue. Facebook and Google don't make clear either their guidelines or reasoning for accepting or rejecting paid political content or the process by which they make those decisions. This lack of transparency may lead outsiders to believe the worst, especially when tech chief executives make political statements that don't accord with their prospective customers' beliefs. So although censorship isn't happening at the level many claim, big tech needs to provide more transparency and around their rules and how they make decisions. This current lack of explanation leads many to assume that these big tech companies are out to get them. Back in 2017, I was banned from Twitter, and I've been banned ever since. At the time, I was quick to claim censorship or bias. But looking back now, I can see the guidelines I'd probably violated, no matter how ridiculous they might be. I appealed the decision and only received a brief, automated email explaining that my account was permanently suspended due to violating the Twitter guidelines on targeted harassment. Of course, I was confused. I was given no examples of this so-called harassment, and I was never given a further explanation. This lack of transparency and communication made it easy for me to believe that I was a victim of big tech censorship. Even the Data and Society researcher who looked into PragerU's claims noted that YouTube's lack of transparency makes it difficult to identify the algorithms and processes behind deletions. This is true because the decision-making process is so murky and kept so quiet with little or no communication other than automated emails, this creates a breeding ground for conspiracy theories about big tech censorship to fester. So in summary, big tech censorship is not as black and white as many make it out to be. Bias exists and can negatively impact decisions within Facebook and Twitter, but it seems there is no real censorship of conservatives on YouTube. We need to remember that any difficulty we face is not directly because we are conservative. This is a victim mentality that sadly is propagated by many loud conservative voices who really just care about their bottom line. I am not a victim, and neither are you. You have an uncensored voice, so use it for good. Don't be afraid to spread your conservative beliefs online. Do so respectfully and truthfully, and you, along with thousands of other conservatives, can build a successful online community. And that's the truth about censorship.
Everyone give a big round of applause for Hunter. Woo! Yeah. Now it's time to give a little taste of our next speaker here.
There is no principled argument for censorship, only arguments from power. As John Milton observed in Areopagitica, the censor must assume to themselves above all others in the land the grace of infallibility and uncorruptedness, which man is clearly not. Man is an imperfect creature, and anything he builds will, in turn, be imperfect. These imperfections will lead to the degradation and eventual collapse of his creations. The greater the flaw, the sooner this will occur. A civil order is no exception to this rule, and all of man's systems of governance hold deep contradictions that cannot be resolved by a greater commitment to the existing order itself, because it is the existing order that is responsible for the problem. A contradiction becomes a point of conflict, and a point of conflict becomes a nexus around which pressure against the current system will build. Those who are disaffected by the status quo will find one another and put pressure on the established order to resolve their complaint. This is why liberal democracy is such an unusually stable form of government. Like all philosophies, liberalism is riddled with contradictions, but maintains itself by minimizing the effects of such through the use of free speech. Unlike a socialist or fascist regime, which must criminalize free thought and suppress its dissidents, a liberal democracy welcomes them as the canary in the coal mine. Dissidents are a sign of the problems the status quo itself is creating, and the liberal order survives by adapting itself in line with the complaints, not only to ease this pressure, but to fulfill the purpose of the liberal state in the first place, to guarantee the rights of its citizens.
Put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop.
However, this can only be done if people are actually able to voice their complaints, to raise the alarm. This is not just a favor that we extend to people. We consider it integral to their very personhood. Free speech is one of our human rights. From the perspective of a socialist or fascist state, it is necessary and desirable to criminalize, suppress, and persecute opposition to preserve the painstakingly established top-down order. But the liberal state has no such ideological goal. Censorship must therefore be repugnant to a liberal democracy, as its only purpose is to preserve the hegemonic power of the established order from change. The state is given a mission beyond preserving the rights of its citizens, and this gives the state justification to ignore or suppress your rights when it is deemed necessary. There is no objective line that can be drawn of unacceptable or acceptable speech. The degree to which one censors is arbitrary, and the scope of what could be censored is practically without limit. The more often we censor, the more normalized censorship becomes, and the new normal creates new extremes, closer to the center, that in turn must now be policed. One might wish to outlaw the N-word, and once that is done, by what logic do we resist outlawing further insults or slurs against black people? As people become accepting of the new normal, they become sensitive to those closer breaches, and the noose of censorship draws ever more tight. There is no compelling reason why we should stop at any point, until all speech is regulated by censors with unlimited power and zero restraint. Through our own good intentions to try and prevent racism or any other social malaise, we increase by degrees the number of citizens who are declared to be enemies of the status quo, as we turn the state tyrannical in our attempt to perfect society. Around this new nexus of contradiction the persecuted gather, and they have tangible justification for their resistance to the state. After all, they were persecuted by it for exercising their natural rights. Where free speech prevents violence through dialogue, censorship guarantees violence by making it the dissident's only remaining option. To prevent this, we must remember that no matter how unsavory the message, all dissident voices are important.
All right, everyone. It's time to give a warm, happy, high-energy welcome to the Gamergate sensation, the English liberal political YouTuber that's been banned from Twitter, banned from Patreon, and is a former UKIP MEP candidate. Let's all welcome Sargon of Akkad.
I can't believe you actually turned up in a clown suit. Right. So I've got to say I think you went too hard in the other direction there, Hunter. I don't want to start on bad blood or anything, but I think that conservatives are being censored deliberately. But I'll explain my point. I think the best way of describing it is how Tim Pool did with Joe Rogan. The censorship is both ways because the tools of the censor are inaccurate, to say the least, especially on social media now. Oh dear. You know, I'm actually not going to complain at that. But it's the way they're going to define you out of existence that's the problem. They'll restrict what you can and can't say through the use of what they say is acceptable speech in order to essentially make every space progressive. And so you will find yourself ever more boxed in and ever more restricted. And I don't think that this is actually something that's outside of the realm of free speech and government censorship. A lot of these platforms actually required government aid to actually come into existence in the first place. But more than that, I think it's the spirit of the thing that's important. Because, I mean, look at the reaction to the fact that we're going to speak here today. Look at the absolute desperation from the protesters and complicity from the establishment here. It took Donald Trump tweeting out today about Turning Point USA and to threaten them, saying, look, if you deplatform speakers, we're going to take away your funding. If you didn't have a conservative president, you wouldn't have that, and I wouldn't be here right now. And then we go on to the various deliberate infractions. Now, I'm not saying that the data you have is wrong, of course. I'm sure that conservative pages are indeed very well represented on the platforms on which they still prosper. But I think it's interesting how it's the conservatives who are reaching out and desperate for something that reflects their worldview. Because a leftist, and I really wish you wouldn't call them liberals, sorry, I'm not trying to go, their views are represented everywhere, in every institution around you. Find me a conservative institution. You are the underground dissidents. And I say this as an outsider looking in. I feel bad for what conservatives are going through. And I realize that you really hate to play the victim. I realize that's not in your character. You are believers in personal agency. You are people who think, I am responsible for what happens to me. But sometimes there is someone above you with such power over your lives that there's nothing you can do, and you can't just be blind to that. The best example is Steven Crowder. Is he not the largest conservative YouTube channel in all of human history. And it takes one lispy queer to whine about it on Twitter. Oh. You're in some serious trouble for bringing that pillow, my friend. But one annoying leftist gets enough retweets, and that's Steven Crowder's entire income gone. His channel was taken down. I mean, what would you have done if YouTube had not brought it back up?
I mean, I don't know. I'd have to start reaching out
But you are indeed right that it does go both ways. And that's because the tools that they're using are inaccurate, because the scope of what they have to manage is unfathomably large, and so they have no choice. The problem was the fact that there is a group of people forcing these platforms to deplatform people on the basis of political ideology. That's actually a really bad idea and not how we should be organizing society. Because at the end of the day, if they want to be platforms and not publishers, they can't start taking editorial decisions. There are loads, and I don't like the alt-right, and I'm sure you're all aware, but I think they should have a right to exist. But Facebook and YouTube have taken these editorial decisions. I mean, look at Paul Joseph Watson. He has something like how many subscribers did he have on Facebook? Something like 1 million followers on Facebook. He got taken down because he had talked about Tommy Robinson, another person who had been taken down with more than 2 million followers, more than all of the British political parties combined. And he was taken down because of his criticisms of Islam. Paul Joseph Watson's page was taken down because he had tried to support Tommy Robinson. So I'm honestly of the opinion that this is the case. And recently, Steven Crowder did another great thing. He pointed out on his show that if you search for his channel, and the same goes for my channel, you don't get any of his videos. But if you, for example, search for my new channel, I've got a new channel called Acad Daily. If you search for it, you get every one of my videos. All the results are for that channel. So if that's not clear evidence of censorship, I actually don't know what is. I was actually not going to talk about censorship, but I feel that I really have to make the point, because I appreciate that you don't want to wallow in victimhood. You really don't, right? But you've got to face the facts. This is a war you guys are losing, and you're going to lose everything, because at the end of the day, those social media accounts don't belong to anyone else. You know, no one else uses them, and you build them up. And when you're in our position, they're your livelihood. You know, there are people who are dependent on you. And in many cases, for example, again, Steven Crowder, where they actively said, you have not broken these rules, but it just took more mob pressure on Twitter for them to go, screw it, we're going to demonetize you anyway. Can't go on. Even the God Emperor himself is aware of this. You have to be able to speak. And if they pull out your tongue, how are you going to do it? So I won't go on excessively, because I'd like to answer questions, because I think that'd be more fun. But I think that we shouldn't understate the problem that we have here. I mean, like, for example, like Patreon. I was not using Patreon's platform when they deplatformed me from it. What they've done is claimed ownership over all of my online activity. I wasn't even on my own platform, and I was insulting Nazis. So it's a weird hill to die on for Patreon, I thought. But it was the same for Twitter, to be honest. But yeah, I won't go on at length. I'd rather take questions. So let's do that.
Okay, we're gonna do Q&A now. So if you have a question, just come line up in the middle aisle. But yeah.
Testing. If you have a Sargon pillow, I'm not answering your question. I'm joking. I'm joking.
There y'all go around.
Hello. Mic working?
Okay. Just like say your name, I guess your question.
Do I get
You don't have to
my pronouns?
Yeah, and your pronouns.
Hi, Sargon and Hunter.
Hey, man.
I wanted to tell you I've been watching you since Gamergate, so hundreds of hours spent, and anyways, loved your content.
It's always nice to meet a veteran.
Yeah, I survived the war.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, too, General. So I was told to give my pronouns. I identify as an attack helicopter, if that's relevant. Anyway, I've personally been censored both in real life by my professor who cut me off. She had pre-approved the topic ahead of time and then didn't like the direction I took it, and been also asked to remove tweets. With platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and even Pinterest censoring content they deem objectionable, which is anything to the right of like Noam Chomsky, do you see them ever truly upholding free speech, aside from the usual caveats of direct calls for violence, slander, etc.? I mean, mostly conservatives, but also some Democrats, like even one of our candidates, Tulsi Gabbard, have really kind of had it with being told by woke skulls in Silicon Valley that you can't say this and you can't think that. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
I think that they don't really care. They've got no particular financial investment in political content, believe it or not. It makes up, I mean, YouTube gets something, what was it, 2 billion unique users a month. A tiny fraction of the hundreds of millions of views on YouTube are actually political content. This is something that Susan Wojcicki was talking about recently. Honestly, I think eventually they'll probably say, screw it. They'll just yeet political content off YouTube because it's a lot of hassle for them. It really is, and they get it awfully in the neck because the people that most are most vocal about it are the people closest to them. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that the owners of the tech giants, Tim Cook aside, who sounds these days like a preacher, are not actually that ideological in and of themselves. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg gave a speech at Georgetown University the other day that was surprisingly pro-free speech. And I think that he probably does genuinely believe it, but you've got to understand the people around them are often not, and especially because it's, you know, they're based in San Francisco. So all of the individuals, you know, or the overwhelming majority of the individuals manning the infrastructure that lays under him, they're all going to be very politically one-sided, and they're going to be putting pressure on him. And I mean, it's honestly something I'm not particularly optimistic about. But I mean, maybe you're more optimistic.
Could you repeat the question? I thought that was a question for Sargon.
It was, but you might have.
I can give you the TLDR. Basically, everyone and their grandmother censoring things. Do you think that they're ever going to be like, maybe I should follow the general freedom of speech, except for, you know, slander, actual calls to violence and stuff?
Well, I do think that kind of like what I talked about in my speech, I think that a lot of the times it's easy to label these instances as censorship when it really comes down to the company lacking transparency. I don't really agree with the whole censorship thing, mostly because YouTube does have a financial incentive to host political content. I know that it might be a fraction of all the content in the grand scheme of things, but I know that YouTube is, I mean, it's a growing platform for the right wing. And so I think that at the end of the day, I think that they're allowed to withhold whichever community guidelines they choose. They don't operate based on freedom of speech, even though that'd be really nice if they did. So I guess only time will tell. But I don't think that we're moving in the direction of every conservative channel getting deleted off the internet. No.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Honker the Clown. You might recognize me from such events as the Straight Pride Parade in Boston, Massachusetts. Behind me, this is the very pillow that you shout out in your channel, actually. It is the one and the same. And I'd like to personally invite you to join us next year in 2020. But my question involves, I have a little bit of a parallel to draw and then a question about it. So here in America, we have what's called Trump derangement syndrome, right? Where these crazy leftists, you know, are just that. They legitimately go insane over Trump's Twitter account, let's say. And I'm witnessing a similar phenomenon, I feel, in the UK about Brexit, Brexit derangement syndrome, if you will. And I've, you know, listened at length you talk on your channel about people who have, you know, taken this spiral down, you know, going insane over Brexit. And the question I have for you is, what do you do in your own personal life to keep yourself from getting to that point of, you know, just like Brexit, just, you know, overtaking your mind and going absolutely insane?
I am absolutely sick of talking about Brexit. I really wish they'd just do it. I mean, it's quite a scary position, but the whole issue of derangement syndrome is a very interesting one, because I bet nobody remembers the libertarian protests against Barack Obama, do they? But man, that was some Barack Obama derangement syndrome. They were just calling him a communist. Now, you don't have to like Barack Obama to know that he's not a communist. He's just a center leftist, really. But these protests were every bit the Trump derangement syndrome. And I think what it comes down to is when there's a fundamental breach of principle in what's going on. They just could not stand the government intervention that Obama wanted, in the same way that the leftists now cannot stand the fact that Trump is not going to apologize for the mean things he said. And when you get to this sort of point, you've either got to accept it or flip out. And there'll probably come a time where you guys are having some sort of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez derangement syndrome when she's the president and she's bringing in communism.
Don't say that.
I agree.
It's already happening.
I don't want that either, but the fact that you all reacted like that is exactly my point, right? That's just exactly what I mean. I agree. I don't want her to be president either, but this is something that we're going to have to figure out. And I'm not saying I've got the answers either, but this is not an individual, a one-sided issue. This is an issue that affects everyone. And as things become more polarized and each ideology is pushed towards its more extreme points, I think we're going to see it more and more. And honestly, I think it's really concerning.
I would agree. Thank you.
And so does the baby.
Adorable, by the way.
So a big problem that we have with the left right now is just a ton of hypocrisy. There's basically no statute of limitations for how you've sinned in the eyes of the left. However, a lot of what we've been dealing with lately is just stuff the left did like 15 years ago. We've noticed it with Trudeau and blackface. It's come to light recently with Biden and political lynching, and trust me, there are a lot more people who use political lynching. But the thing is, heck, even the 2016 election was mostly just a new programmed Hillary versus half the things she said 15 years ago. That was half of Trump's platform. But there's all this hypocrisy, and it's still coming to light just how much more there is. Yet people are still ignoring it. Is there a way we can just kind of hammer down on that point for the left's integrity?
I wouldn't bank on leftist integrity, frankly. I mean, I think it's entirely to Hunter's credit and the credit of conservatives for not simply booing him. And he said, look, I think this is overblown. I mean, I disagree. I think that we've got a point of contention here. But the fact that you guys, he made the point that you guys listened and applauded is genuinely impressive, because I bet if this was a democratic gathering and someone got up and said, right, okay, look, I think maybe the claims of racism have been overblown, they'd get probably, well, lynched on the stage. So I don't think that they care. They've got a kind of messianic goal in mind, and they're so close to it. They just need to censor a few more people to get there. So I would stop wasting your time, because the thing is, at the end of the day, an allegation of hypocrisy is really just an ad hominem. It's just saying you are the problem. You're not addressing anyone's points. You know, you're saying, oh, you used to. So what? They don't care. They hate you. They'd put you in a gulag if they could. You know, they're not going to sit there and go, oh, God, I'm so ashamed. You know, the people outside are absolutely shameless. The unbelievable lies that they say about someone. Imagine writing a screed about someone that is just entirely negative, right? That's the sort of thing you do to Hitler. That's the sort of thing you do to Stalin. You don't sit there and go, well, actually, I mean, he was a vegan who cared for animals, so, you know, maybe he wasn't all that bad. And that's how they consider us. So, you know, don't sit there worrying about that. You've got to speak to the regular person who doesn't really know what's going on and say, look, you know, I think these people are really far out. I'm not like that, and I'm willing to have a reasonable dialogue.
So just wanted to say, Hunter, this is the first time I've ever heard of you was me showing up tonight, and I actually very appreciated your message, even if I don't fully agree with it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Sargon, love you, but also fuck you. I love you, but you know how it is. So I guess the main question that I have is, I'm a huge gamer, kind of rotund at this point too. So the big question that I have is, what is your stance on the actions that Blizzard has taken over the, I forget the guy's name now, pressure of being up here. Blitz, what he said.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to know your opinions on that and how you think we could move forward in trying to pressure companies to support more, I guess, moral causes.
Honestly, I think the problem is pressuring companies to support moral causes. I mean, have we not had enough of that yet? The whole point of capitalism is that the market is anonymous and it is neutral. You know, you're not supposed to really know who you're dealing with. You don't want your companies to become ethical companies. I mean, this is the problem that we have with socialism and fascism. They've got an ethical agenda and they want to enforce it on you. It's the same thing the Chinese do. That's the reason that so many companies are currently, we're going to censor any talk of China. We're not going to have any of this, because the Chinese have an ethical agenda. It's a different one to your ethical agenda, obviously. But the thing that we should be asking for is neutrality. And to be honest with you, the guy did go up and say, well, I support a political cause. And that was actually in the rules, that he wasn't allowed to make a political statement there. So I can't actually criticize Blizzard that much. Now, I'm not particularly up on the Blizzard issue because I haven't really been following that much. But I mean, but the thing is, then you come to the counter argument of, well, if they're doing it, what are we going to do? Stand here defenseless? Good point. You know, I can't say that you should just stand there and let them do it. I'm totally in support of the Hong Kong protesters. I think China at this point is a fascist state, and we should be doing everything we can in the same way of Saudi Arabia, just everything we can to stop interacting with them. You know, I would rather have someone else manufacturing our goods. I'd rather that manufacturing come back home, you know, but at the end of the day, we're stuck. We're stuck between lots of bad decisions, and we're going to have to just make those rough ones as they come, man.
Hello. I apologize. I would like to ask a Brexit question. We don't get that opportunity much in central Pennsylvania. So if the UK were to actually leave the customs union, it would necessitate some level of border checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which would violate the Good Friday Accords. And I'm honestly curious, why is Brexit more important than the Good Friday Accords, in the opinion of the Liberals?
So what he's suggesting is that it'll return to the period of time in Britain called the Troubles, where there was a huge amount of Irish nationalist terrorism. Ironically, this is actually ethno-nationalist terrorism that we're talking about, but nobody ever wants to frame it that way. I don't think that the Irish have a just cause here at all, because in 1922, the Irish voted to leave the British Empire, and they created the Irish Free State. But Northern Ireland voted to remain. They didn't want to leave. So I think that the IRA is a terrorist organization with no just cause. But what Boris Johnson had managed to do is actually negotiate quite a sensible compromise. It would be a hypothetical border, but what it would be is custom checks, not on a border, but at depot points, and using various electronic tagging mechanisms and things like that. So it actually quite slyly circumvented that. So I don't think that it will actually violate the Good Friday Agreement. And one of the authors of the Good Friday Agreement actually said that he was happy with Boris's arrangement. So I'm quite happy with that. But speaking to the why is it more important, honestly, because we voted for it. And if our votes don't matter because of some prior commitment, then why would we vote in the future?
Thank you.
Hi, so I just want to say, first of all, huge fan. And my question is, do you believe that so-called anti-Semitic speech, such as the boycott, divest, sanction movement, should also be protected as free speech?
Yeah, any kind of speech that isn't directly inciting violence should be protected as free speech.
Can I clarify? Because I believe it is illegal in the United States to support the BDS movement if you have a government contract. Is why I felt that was an important question.
Yeah, but that might be a separate concern, because I mean, like, for example, if you want your institutions to remain neutral, then you probably shouldn't have institutions that are where you have people openly parroting political opinions. I mean, this is one of the problems that we currently have with, I mean, like in your university, I bet if you were to check the faculty's Twitter pages, I bet they're pretty leftist, aren't they? So, and that's really not the kind of thing you want. I mean, this is like in your armed forces. They're not allowed. A guy got in trouble for wearing a Kekistan patch, and he was right to be in trouble for it because it is a political message, you know. So if you're supposed to be apolitical, you're not allowed to do that. So I mean, technically, it is a free speech concern, but there are going to be times if you're working in an institution where you probably shouldn't be voicing political concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so I'm a Gamergate veteran as well, so I wanted to thank you for that. I knew a lot of good frogs who never came back, so gamers rise up. Gamers rise up.
Honestly, that's the best thing I've heard so far.
So honestly, Sargon, I didn't know much about you before today, and you kind of have a little bit of a reputation as somewhat of a goofball online, but
Sure.
I was pleasantly surprised by what you said, and I found myself agreeing with a lot of it. But my question was, so I actually do believe somewhat in having ethical causes and in including that in political action. I think that as a political movement, we also have a responsibility to build up the social foundation for that political superstructure. I think we need to be promoting vitalism and community and family and all of those things as well. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the separation between state and society is that society is effectively left to run its own devices. And so, I mean, this is so frustrating hearing Americans talk about things like pan-Europeanism and stuff like that. We're a European country. No, you're an English country. Right? No, you absolutely are, which is why you have a constitution, right? The Germans didn't create a constitution. The French had an absolute monarch when we had a Bill of Rights. You're an English country. These countries are where tyranny comes from, right? And these countries didn't create the separation between the state and society. It was the yeoman with his longbow that created that, and that's why you have your Second Amendment. Okay? You are not French or German countries, and I really wish you'd understand that, because the whole point is the English are what are known as a clubbable society, right? They form clubs, they form groups, they go out and do the things that they want to do, and that's exactly what you're suggesting. And I totally agree, that's exactly what you should be doing, because it's these structures that build a kind of social power base away from government intervention. And that's actually a check on tyranny. So yeah, you definitely should do that. And the more that they try to isolate you and atomize you from these things, the weaker you become and the stronger they become. And you want a strong society to prevent a big tyrannical government. It's the only way to do it.
Thank you. First off, I watch your videos a lot, Sargon. I really appreciate your content. Hunter, I haven't heard of you before, but I will definitely check you out. Sorry, no offense.
Subscribe.
Yeah, you're getting loads of new subscribers here, don't you?
So I wanted to ask a question because earlier you said that The Economist, I believe it was, found that there is no Google search algorithmic bias against conservatives, but All Sides, which is a nonpartisan organization, found that it does indeed censor or at least filter to the extent of about 65% of political related search results are left-leaning and about half of the others are center. And not only does it have the left-leaning filter, but it also has a corporate filter, which means all of the corporate news like CNN, but also Fox News gets rated significantly above independent producers like yourself, which is what I prefer to watch. And an example of this, like YouTube, whenever I searched up Ukraine, I would have to dig through 80 or 90 videos before I would find one by, say, Tim Pool that had 300,000 views, and I would be scrolling past videos with 3,000 views from CBS News. Furthermore, like Google, when I Googled Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton pictures, the first image that popped up was a picture of 20 years ago of Donald Trump with Epstein, and they pushed all of the Bill Clinton ones to the bottom. So would you say that there is no bias against conservatives with respect to the algorithms, even though the executives themselves have espoused that they believe that it is their moral obligation to stop Trump in 2020?
Well, I would really like to see more about this study. I have not heard of the study. The one I was brought up from The Economist talks about, it actually went into what you mentioned on how certified syndicated news companies are put at the top of search results. I would have to see the study to give you a better answer. Again, I certainly think that bias can motivate decisions that'll negatively impact conservative content creators, but I don't think it's at the level that many make it out to seem. I don't think that it's a big conspiracy against all the conservatives to drown out their content. Kind of like, Sargon, you brought up earlier what Steven Crowder mentioned about the channel not coming up. The same thing was happening with my channel too at the time, and then like 3 days later it was back up and everyone's channel now comes up with their latest
Yeah, but that's because Steven Crowder actually got YouTube to change the way that it displays. It displays the top two videos, the latest two videos that come up because of Stephen Crowder's evidence that they're actually censoring these things. I mean,
So they changed it because Steven Crowder
Yes.
complained about
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
I mean, I've complained about it before, and then it got fixed, and then it changed, and then it got fixed again. So if it's some kind of a censorship, it doesn't seem like it's.
I think it's more that it's
that
very
impactful.
subtle. I mean, I don't know if anyone saw the Robert Epstein congressional testimony. He's a friend of Hillary Clinton, and he went to Congress and said, "Look, I'm here because I believe that Google is actually actively interfering in the democratic process." And by his estimation, by his calculations, funneled 2.5 million votes to Hillary just on the inherent bias of the algorithm itself. Because it's not necessarily that they're sat there going, right, Hunter Avalon censored, Sargon censored. But what it is, the way that it works is in line with leftist ideology. And so, like with Twitter banning people for misgendering, that's entirely political. There's no other way of looking at that because everyone else doesn't care about it. But the left say, well, everything's political, the person is political, and therefore you misgendering me is political, and people can lose their accounts over it. So I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not saying that your data is wrong because it's obviously not. There is a huge conservative presence on social media, but where else are you guys going to go? And that was the thing. There was the Google thing where they said we're going to stop. Who was it at Google? It was a really high up guy giving a talk.
Wasn't that during like a conference where they were
Yeah.
like talking and
Yeah, yeah.
venting their grievances about Trump?
Post-election, I believe there was a video, but there was also, I believe, a female Google executive. I'm not sure exactly what her title was, but she literally came out and said
The
that they are
Project Veritas
trying
one.
to affect the election.
Was it the Project Veritas?
I know that.
believe
Well,
so.
maybe again, you are bringing up some things that I honestly have not
Yeah.
seen. As far as the Google meeting where they were all talking, I have heard about that and where they were kind of airing their grievances against Trump. I don't deny that the people running Google are complete libcocks, right? Like everyone kind of knows this, but even if you look at that one instance where they were talking about not liking Donald Trump or whatever, it was shown later that wasn't a discussion around the algorithm. That wasn't a discussion around how they're operating the site. It was actually just a company meeting where they were just able to sort of air their grievances, which I think is important for companies to encourage their employees to be open about their politics as well. Again, I think it's more of a nuanced discussion. I don't think that it's as deliberate as many make it out to seem.
Okay. Also, you talked about because it's not the state, it's not necessarily protected by the First Amendment, which is a common thing that I hear from very libertarian people that say, oh, it's a private company, they can do what they want. However, as libertarian as I might be on a number of issues myself, do you not have to acknowledge the fact that when you have these tech giants like Google, I mean, Google is essentially a monopoly, and they're not just search results, but like they are YouTube. They're putting out self-driving cars. They are a massive entity, and now they've merged into Alphabet. So when these tech giants like Google, Facebook, Twitter, they have 90% of their market cornered or more, do you think that they should be held to a higher standard than just say like your local mom and pop's like grocery store in terms of behavior?
I mean, certainly Google is a huge, they control so much information that we all see. So I certainly think they should be held to a higher standard. And again, I do think that Google has a bias that can sometimes affect how information is portrayed. So yes, I think that they should be held to a higher standard. I just don't know if it's necessary, if we necessarily want the government to be the one holding that company to a higher standard.
Yeah, who else is going to do it though, man?
I mean, we can continue putting pressure on the company the way we have when they screw up. I just think that there's not like a lot of the stuff you brought up earlier, kind of to support the claims of censorship. They weren't really very convincing, especially to say that like people are protesting us outside. That I don't think that's any proof of censorship. Like Planned Parenthood
they
gets
didn't
censored
because Donald Trump threatened to pull the funding of the university.
But that wasn't. Penn State issued a statement today. Did you read the statement?
I did.
They support free speech. They support ours coming.
They said they were forced to support free speech, and they
did not
denounced
say
us
it.
in categoric
They
terms.
did, you're right. They did denounce us,
Yeah.
but they said that they support free speech. I'm not saying we forced them to.
I do think you're being too optimistic, to be honest, because I think that had Donald Trump not leveled this threat on Twitter, then they would have pulled us. I don't think we'd be here without that. I mean, honestly, I think you're way more optimistic than me on this.
I might be more optimistic. I just think that a lot of the evidence that
you have invoked to support censorship isn't very convincing.
Well, I mean, I got
say that we're being-
deplatformed from 2 universities before coming to this one.
Right. I mean, and that would be a problem with the university, but this isn't big tech censorship.
No,
which is
no, I
more
didn't
what
say.
was specifically.
Yeah,
focused
yeah,
on.
absolutely.
I want to make it clear that like I'm not saying conservatives are never censored. I think that there is certainly censorship that goes on as far as on college campuses for conservatives. That's why I tried to make sure that my speech made it very clear that I was referring to big tech censorship alone. So again, I want to make it clear that I don't think that conservatives are never censored in any sphere. But as far as big tech goes, I just don't see it. I see a huge conservative online presence, and I see massive like there was a recent LGBT lawsuit against. I'm sure you've heard about it. I did like a couple videos on it because it was so ridiculous. But there's a big LGBT lawsuit. People suing YouTube, and actually in that lawsuit, they're claiming YouTube is promoting content that's anti-LGBT or that's against them. Because I don't know if you guys have heard of the channel Queer Kids Stuff. It's kind of a smaller channel, but right. So I've done a lot of videos on that channel just debunking that woman's ludicrous claims. And so I have reason to believe that part of this lawsuit, it does have something to do with my repeated content I made on her. But so I mean, you kind of have it from all different sides. Conservatives claim we're being censored, but then on the flip side, a bunch of trans people are claiming, oh no, we're being censored or we're being discriminated against because YouTube is promoting and profiting off videos that are anti-LGBT.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a legitimate claim. But I think Steven Crowder having his entire channel demonetized is a legitimate
Well, Steven Crowder didn't violate the community guidelines to get his channel deleted, but he did violate the guidelines when it comes to the monetization policy. Also, when he got his monetization stripped away, he did not have his livelihood stripped. The guy, he's making millions of dollars. I mean, he signed with the Blaze TV.
Sure, but I mean, YouTube came out and said that he did nothing wrong, and
He said he did nothing wrong to warrant being deleted, but he did violate their policy when it came to monetization because he was selling a shirt that said "fag" on it, and which I think it's funny. I think it's funny.
Yeah, and that was after saying that they weren't going to take action.
Right, and I think that. Right. Well, I mean, in all fairness, YouTube may have gone out of their way to find something that they could kind of label as him not following the guidelines as far as for the monetization policy. But you can. Well, who's saying they don't do that to the leftist channels either? I've seen leftist channels that are completely, fully demonetized. Who? Name the channel that's completely demonetized? Oh yeah, there's a channel called Vosh. He actually went into his channel and showed how all of his videos are yellow, are demonetized. Again, it's not as cut and dry as a lot of people make it out to be.
Hi, Sargon. Hi, Hunter. Love your guys' content. I watch you guys all the time whenever you guys upload, and I do get the notifications, so that's good at least.
Good. That's good news. There you go.
But before my question here, I just want to say that Becca Lewis doesn't know what she's talking about at all because I watch you guys, Styx, Tim Pool, pretty much everybody on that list, and I don't have any slight inkling of oppressing any Jew or minority or anything like that. So that's a good thing. But what I want to say is, because the ramping up of censorship going on here, people who are starting out wanting to be content creators, there's so much pressure against actually trying to get into this. Do you guys think that this is going to create like a content creator gap to where, I mean, I know you guys aren't going to be doing this forever and ever and ever. You guys, your lives are going to change. You're going to go on to do different things. But do you think that it'll create a content gap, and what ramifications that might cause?
I don't know. I think that the ease of access to the platform means that there's never going to be a shortage of people who are trying to create content. If anything, it'll just become an excessively crowded market, which will be frustrating for people who want to start, but what can you do?
I honestly couldn't have said it better myself. I think that there's always going to be a flow of content creators as long as the platform is easy access.
Howdy, guys. In regards, it's not necessarily towards censorship, but with your recent discussions on Twitter about the value of the family and how that's basically the secular goal of life, and you raising a family as well.
Oh, I see you found my secret Twitter account.
Yep. How do you deal? How would you deal with the scientifically proven destructive drug that is pornography, especially within regards of destroying the family?
Porn is degenerate. Let me just say that right now. Stay away from the pornography, guys. You know what? If I could be super open with you guys, who hasn't looked at porn, right? Of course, I've had my fair share of times on porn. However, I will say,
That's the only real porn anyway.
Porn absolutely is degenerate. There are ways that it does screw with your brain, and I can tell, I know it's anecdotal to bring in my own personal experience, but just with my own personal experience, I have dealt with OCD, anxiety, and such in the past, and pornography is no friend to that predisposition where you already have a lot of, negative, intrusive thoughts and so forth. So yeah, I would definitely say that porn is destructive. Sorry to cut you off there.
Oh, no, not at all. I think that's a great point. It's like all things, I think, everything in moderation, really. But the problem with the internet is it's awash with free porn, and it's the hardest core porn you could ever think of. I mean, when I was your age, sounding like a grandfather here, but seriously, a little bit younger than you say, we didn't have the internet. When we were like 15, we didn't have the internet. So we didn't have access to this. Now you've got all this stuff on your phone, and there's no question of the fact that there is something called porn addiction, and that it does destroy the lives of young men. There's no question of it. The thing that you have to do is be a responsible parent. You can't really get the internet pulled down. That's always going to be there, and there's always going to be a way of finding that. I mean, for example, my son is literally never going to get a smartphone. He's going to have to leave my house before he gets on the internet, and his friends will say, well, that's unfair, and he'll say yes, and I'll say tough. So.
Hi, guys. I'm the dreaded MRA in the audience. So I was actually wondering, I've seen a couple of cases in the United States, specifically for circumcision and for the draft, where basically because they don't want to give men the potential right of bodily autonomy and not having to serve in order to get your vote, they've actually attempted to extend that right or that infringement upon that right to women. And there's actually a case presently that might actually allow female circumcision in the United States, as well as draft of women in the United States, because it's been deemed unconstitutional.
How progressive.
Yeah, so I was wondering what you guys think about that.
I'm afraid I'm not aware of that, so I can't speak to it.
Yeah, circumcision is a question that I've been asked about before. I'm sorry, man. I haven't done a lot of research into the subject, so I don't think I could really give you a very good answer.
I'd say, as someone not from America, though, it's so weird that so many people here are circumcised, and you hear the arguments for it. It's like, oh, it's good.
Circumcised gang.
Yeah, but it's weird. It's like, I don't know why you're applauding. Is that something worthy of applause?
No.
Yes.
Really? Why?
I'm kidding. I'm
like,
really
seriously, it's such a strange thing, because most other countries don't do that. That's the sort of thing that Islamic fundamentalists do. That's the sort of thing that Jewish fundamentalists do. It's a weird thing, and the medical arguments for it are nonsense, absolute nonsense. But like I said, I'm no expert on that. I don't really know where you're going. So
I was mostly asking about the idea that it's actually, instead of granting the rights to the men, they actually are just trying to extend the infringement to women. I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's not a good idea at all. Also, I mean, just not to get all detailed or whatever, but like, it's a lot different when it comes to a woman versus a man also. So I think that would be very dangerous.
Thank you.
Have I met you before?
Many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never forget a face. Man.
I know you don't. Sargon Hunter, wonderful to see you. Hunter, I first saw you at the Minds IRL event, and great event. And I kind of wanted to push back about some of the stuff that you said and kind of pit and something Sargon has said in the past. Edginess. I love edgy humor. I think that a lot of people forget that less than 15 years ago, it was edgy to be pro-LGBT rights. Less than 70 years ago, it was, edgy to be pro-interracial marriage. And, the edginess as
Yeah,
a
just ask Hillary Clinton, right?
I mean, apparently it's not edgy to be, wear blackface in Canada anymore. So like, but my
need that Obama endorsement, man.
Yeah. But my problem is, I think that line where we see, something, the content is edgy, something isn't acceptable now, 20 years from now will be. And so what I have an issue with is when you say that conservatives aren't being censored or like liberals aren't being censored. I agree that it's not just conservatives. It's, self-described liberals, anyone who's anti-establishment. But my issue is, how can you say that just conform to the terms of service of a multinational corporation, conform to the terms of service, and then they move that line? And then all of a sudden it's edgy to talk about circumcision. It's edgy to talk about Sargon. It's edgy to talk about Hunter. And that in and of itself is enough to get you demonetized. So at what point do you push back and you say no? And how exactly are you going to push back? Because we can petition said companies or we can turn to the state. And I don't know which is the best example, but how do you fight back?
Well, I understand what you're talking about with the moving line, because YouTube has definitely updated their terms of service over the time. And I'm not saying like, oh, just conform to the guidelines and everything will be fine and dandy. Like, sure, YouTube has its flaws, but I can tell you again from personal experience as a YouTuber with over 600,000 subscribers, I do my best to still convey and create edgy content while also pretty much, keeping it in line with YouTube's guidelines. And since I was deleted, pretty much all of my videos have been monetized, even manually confirmed suitable for ads. And I'm talking like political, anti-feminist, anything. I've had videos that you would not expect to be monetized that are running ads on there. So I do think that it matters if you do your best to follow the community guidelines. Kind of like what I said in my speech, I don't like a lot of the community guidelines. I especially don't like the guidelines on Twitter. I do think it's ridiculous that people get banned for misgendering or something. That's a little bit absurd. But the rules exist. And so, I mean, we could protest the rules, but I think that's probably a little bit of a different discussion.
So I just want to back up something you've said there. I've actually noticed that YouTube have been more liberal with what they're monetizing at the moment, because I've got a video coming out called "The Holocaust Has Been Me Too'd." You can see why I'm releasing this after this event, and that got monetized by YouTube. So I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." The thumbnail is "Victims Can Be Victimizers." So, look forward to that one. But that was monetized. So you're right. I think they are actually, I think they are being more, dare I say, liberal in that regard.
YouTube wants to monetize the most content they can.
Technically, yeah.
And I also, you said something that I would like to kind of jump off of earlier, where you talked about how there's other pressure on YouTube to sort of censor. I do think that that's an issue. So talking about big tech censorship, a lot of the times the discussion ends with people saying YouTube doesn't like conservatives, they're censoring conservatives. And that's when I would say that's not really the case, kind of like what I did in my speech. However, I do agree that YouTube is a slave to their advertisers as well as a slave to the mainstream media. So the adpocalypse, what it was called, when everyone got demonetized and everything, that happened because the mainstream media decided to attack YouTube because they didn't like that YouTube was platforming a larger media presence than a lot of mainstream media today. So they came out and started pressuring YouTube, which then resulted in the adpocalypse. So I do think that, again, I know I keep saying, oh, it's another discussion, but there is a good discussion to be had about outside pressure as far as mainstream media and advertisers sort of controlling YouTube and controlling what they want to do. Maybe we can have a discussion on mainstream media and advertiser censoring. Maybe that's a good discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think it's actually really good that you came out and produced a solid version of the counter argument, right? I think that's actually a really valuable thing, because what we've had here is both sides of the discussion. And I'll tell you, if this was a Democrat-run conference, you would have the discussion and then the more radical version of that argument being fed to you.
And a lot of people crying and screaming.
Yeah, exactly. And saying that you're not going far enough. So, but yeah, good job.
Just want to record it. So I have a question about probably the most serious form of censorship, and that is directed to both of you, although Sargon, you might be at a bit of a disadvantage. Who do you think will be all of the Clinton insiders will be the next one to commit suicide.
I mean, I don't know about Clinton insiders, but honestly, I'm putting money on my girl Tulsi, man. I mean,
that's what I was gonna say.
I really hope she doesn't, because man, her Twitter game was immense. The queen of warmongers, personification of the rot. I mean, good God, Hillary must have been fuming after that, you know. But yeah, no, I don't.
Hunter?
What he said.
Was that a serious question?
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
So I actually have two questions, one for you and one for Hunter. So the first one for Hunter is about like the wall and all that. So I feel like immigration is like one of the like a big problem in U.S. And I feel like liberals don't understand what money is and like what like economy is. So. Thank you. All right.
It's because they've never worked a day in their lives. That's why.
So for example, like in California, I see like I've been there before, and like San Francisco and like LA, they have a lot of like poor people around, and it's too expensive to live there. And I see them like have like immigrants coming in illegally, and I'm like, if you can't support your own like people itself, how can you support like these people that are coming in illegally? So I feel like Trump as of now has done a good job, like trying to like slow it down. So my question is like what more can he do to like actually help like the countries in which immigrants are coming from, to help the countries like keep their people there so that like they can better help their country itself.
Is that for me? Was that for me? Well, I think that the discussion about immigration is usually it's very one-sided. So it's either the leftist argument, which is open borders, let everyone just kind of walk into the country, who cares? And then a lot of the times we have people who are more, farther right that say like, no immigration, we don't want any immigration. I think we do need to find a good balance, and I think Trump has done a really good job at that. One thing that I do think needs to be talked about more by conservatives and liberals is that, yes, we do have a problem with illegal immigration. Yes, we do need to build the wall. Data has shown that places where, in a smaller scale, where there are walls, immigration or illegal immigration greatly decreases. But we also need to make the process to become a legal immigrant here easier. So right now, it's unfair that it's easier right now to cross the border illegally than it would be to ever become a US citizen. I think that's a problem, and those policies almost support illegal immigration without really intentionally doing that. So I don't think there's ever going to be a way to fully keep everyone in their own country, and I think that it's okay for immigrants to come here legally. I think that the best thing that we can do is kind of like what Trump has already been talking about as far as building the wall. But then I think we need to improve our immigration process and system to make it easier so that we can have more legal vetted immigrants welcomed into our country.
So the second question is, so I feel like the LGBTQ community, I feel like they put a lot of like stress on themselves. For example, like yesterday I was looking at I actually didn't know all the pronouns, for example. And I was like,
nobody knows all the pronouns, man.
A new one comes out like every minute.
Yeah, don't feel bad about it.
So for example, like they were using like they as a singular noun.
They?
They as a like a pronoun.
Oh, they, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, if I come up to somebody and say like they as a singular, that does not make sense anyway. So I feel like they just like puts like more stress on themselves, and like for example, like them saying that like there's more like there's more than one gender, even though like you go to a store and it's like a man and a guy, like men and women clothes. If you shop online as a men and women, like you put more stress on yourself, saying that there is more than more than two genders when there is only two. So how do you think like they do or they don't put more or they don't put more stress on themselves?
Yeah, they're certainly not helping themselves out by inventing a bunch of pronouns, then demanding insult point that you use them. But there is actually a legitimate use for they as a gender neutral pronoun. If you don't actually know someone's gender, how are you going to refer to them? You've got to say they. You know, they want this, they want that, not he or she, because you don't know what they are. You might not even know who you're talking about, right? But that goes away instantly as soon as you know the gender, the person that you're talking about, because you can identify the gender that they have. And that's what the leftist contention is. They're saying, well, look, you don't actually know my gender, therefore. But that's a really, really selfish way of looking at it, because they will use terms like gender as performative. And if gender's performative, well, who are you performing to? You're performing to the people around you. You know, you want to look like a man, you want to look like a woman, so you know that men and women recognize you as what you are. And so the second that you can see someone, you can tell whether that's a man or a woman, or whether they're trying to be a man or a woman. So the idea of the gender neutral pronouns goes away instantly. So the fact that they're still demanding it, yeah, it's putting ridiculous pressure on themselves, but it's also putting pressure on you, because that's not normal. You know, you're meant to be observing the world around you. It's weird to say, hey, look, you know, I'm going to decide how you view me. That's a really selfish and entitled thing to do, because no one gets to do that. You know, it's your perception, not theirs, you know. So it's unbelievably entitled, and it's never going to work. It's never going to work.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Scargan, this is a question for you. A colleague of yours by the name of Kraut organized a deplatforming campaign against another YouTuber by the name of Rage After Storm. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Right, I don't care.
His actions, along with others, would ultimately lead Rage After Storm ultimately being run off the internet and losing her job. Although your initial public reaction was not positive about what he was doing, he would later go on a kill stream in November of last year when you were being questioned about your connections to Kraut.
My answer to
and
this
his
is I'm literally going to say
deplatforming
I
to other
don't
things
care.
that he was doing.
I literally don't care, man. I'm sorry.
I mean, you said
I'm not
I
answering
don't
internet
disavow
drama
Kraut
questions.
at all. In fact, I completely avow everything he's ever said or done. Can you explain why this is acceptable?
No. I'm sorry, man. This is pointless stuff. It's internet drama. I'm really sorry.
So my question is kind of based towards Hunter, but both of you can answer. So a lot of the things that you said while you were speaking, you claim that the big tech bias it wasn't censorship, it's just a bias. Where do you draw the line between where a bias ends and censorship begins? Because what you described was conservative ideas, like mainstream conservative ideas, were not visible to the public. But that's okay because there are some low-level leftist ideas that nobody in their right mind would support that are being pushed to the back as well. So where does the line get drawn between political bias and political censorship for these big tech companies?
Well, I think bias is more of a subtle thing. I think that bias exists, like, it'd be more likely to find bias, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, within like search results, how data is presented to you when you search. I feel like that's more of what bias is. Censorship, I mean, it kind of goes along with the word. It's being terminated, deleted because of your political views. So that's really where, I mean, maybe that's too harsh of a line to draw, but that's sort of where I would draw the line. Yeah.
So don't these serve the same purpose where the main goal is to keep the regular public from being able to view the content? Isn't that the basic purpose of censorship? And if bias is being used to keep people from viewing the content, isn't that serving the basic use of censorship, whether you define it as such or not?
It would be if the bias was actually doing that, where it's not. I mean, like the data I mentioned, conservative pages on Facebook, conservative YouTube channels, they are outperforming all the leftist pages. So
that's actually not true on YouTube, though. On YouTube, the left.
Maybe that might be a little bit of a sweeping claim.
No,
but
no, no.
For the most part, I mean, right-wingers have a massive presence online, and they do tend to dominate most left-leaning pages.
I don't know. I mean, if you look at the YouTube channels of Vox compared to people like Steven Crowder, Vox have got 2 million more subscribers and billions of more views. Like
I mean, they're also a syndicated page that's been around long.
Sure, absolutely.
So,
but they get pushed to the top of the search rankings. You know, I mean, if I search Steven Crowder, I might not get his videos, but if I search Vox, I certainly get theirs. You know what I mean?
sure. I mean, I think that yes and no. I think that bias, like I said, can play a role in keeping ideas out of the public eye, but based on the data, it just does not seem that that's happening right now.
So just one more part to this. So considering that the majority of content that is actually discovered on a Google search is found on the first page, which, I mean, most of us probably assume this, but it's actually been proven, the majority of people do not go to the second page. If it's not on the first page, they don't search farther. So knowing the habits of the people and knowing that as long as they keep conservative content off that first page, their bias doesn't necessarily keep it off of their search engine completely, but it is removing it from the public eye and from the majority of the public eye.
But that's not happening. I would agree with you if that were happening. I mean, Breitbart, I know a few years ago, Breitbart, I think they, don't quote me on this because I'd have to double check my sources, but I know for a fact that Breitbart at one point was actually getting more clicks than like porn sites, Pornhub or something. I remember someone told me about this, so I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, during the 2016 election, they were doing really well.
I Google I mean, when I'm Googling and doing research for my videos, I see right-wing pages as well as left-wing pages coming up on the first page all the time. So I know that's anecdotal. I mean, the best I can tell you is what the Economist study found is that there really is no ideological bias in Google search results. The bias does exist though, where syndicated certified news sources are usually pushed to the top of search results, probably like on YouTube. But I would agree with your point, but it's not happening. So I can't agree with you.
I'm of the opinion that it's happening, to be honest. I've seen it more than enough times myself just using the search engines. I mean, just look at the autocomplete on Google. You couldn't get a more crystal clear case. Search Donald Trump and then see what comes up, and then search Hillary Clinton and see what comes up.
Well, there's also just a lot more negative articles about Trump.
Yeah, but it's not the articles that are the problem. We're talking just the auto-completion, because that drives traffic in and of itself. And so you won't find anything after a certain point with Hillary that you know is going to be there. Like Hillary Clinton emails doesn't auto-complete. This is happening, man. I'm absolutely.
But that's like it doesn't auto-complete when you're trying to type Hillary Clinton emails. Like that's
billions.
the big tech's doing to keep all of us conservatives
This is
down.
why Robert Epstein was saying, look, we drove millions of votes to Hillary, and he's a Democrat. He's a personal friend of Hillary's, and he's saying it in congressional testimony. They are doing that, man.
I think that bias does can exist, and it does exist on social media platforms, but you'll have to give me more compelling evidence of censorship other than it doesn't autofill one search result for Hillary Clinton.
That's not just one. That's just an example.
What's that? All right, let's see some results. Let's see it happening.
It is. That's
but where?
In the search results.
Where though? Like, tell me where.
What we've just given
because
you examples.
I'm able to, because I'm giving examples.
What examples would you like? Like, what would you satisfy?
I'm giving examples of actual data based on studies that have been conducted that didn't find ideological bias in Google search results. And I'm sorry, but anecdotal evidence or an internal memo doesn't really hold up when you compare it to the data.
Yeah, but then you can just listen to them saying it. Like Tim Cook says it's their responsibility to promote social justice. He'll say it like he's a preacher at a pulpit, like this is an ideological goal. Like this is the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, these of course these people have their own political beliefs, but
so we have this the people at the top saying they want to do it. We've got the memos of them doing it. We've got people like James Damore get fired for simply saying that perhaps there is some sort of science behind the connection between biology and gender. And then you've got all of there's currently a conservative union in Facebook because they're constantly being...
Well, I do think that Facebook is a lot worse than Google and YouTube.
I think they're all as bad as one another at this point. I mean, it's constantly happening.
Not at all. No, we cannot say they're all as bad. I think Twitter out of all of them is the worst because Twitter is ridiculous. All right, I think that if anywhere conservative bias exists, it's on Twitter, but not on YouTube. And it's not at all the same on YouTube when massive conservative channels are able to thrive. Look at how
I think YouTube is the best for it. You're right.
I do think YouTube is
the best option at the moment. But I don't think there's any doubt that, there's so much evidence out there that I'm surprised you're
I just
overlooking.
haven't really heard any evidence, and I've been able to give far more evidence on the contrary.
Okay.
Next question. I just appreciate it if the crowd participation just calm down. We want these guys to discuss the issues, and we don't need everybody giving their 2 cents. But if you have a question, The line is there. Thank you.
Sargon, Hunter, thank you so much for coming to Penn State. My question for you, Sargon, has to do with a book that you recommended back in 2016. It was called Black Flags, The Rise of ISIS by Toby Warwick.
Yep.
And one of the things that Warwick went on to talk about was, the progress of Iraqi Kurdistan, the Kurds, what they've been doing in Syria. And fast forward 3 years now, what are your thoughts on the United States withdrawing troops from Kurdish territory?
I think the United States is in an unwinnable position, and you've really got to decide, are you the policeman of the world or not? Because if you're not, then that means you've got to stand by as these tyrannical regimes start doing whatever they want in the Middle East, or you have to accept responsibility for what they're doing and go in and prevent them. Personally, I think that the Kurds actually deserve their own state. There's 33 million Kurds in a fairly concentrated area in the Middle East, and it was the British, when they carved the place up, that didn't give any real heed and any sensitivity to the nature of the tribal conflicts there. It's undoubtedly a problem, and I mean, I think that they should be supported, but Trump ran on the idea of getting out of the Middle East. What's he going to do? Not fulfill the promise? So it's a real no-win situation, and you guys have got to decide. It's your country.
But also, when you look at a place like Iraq too, when Mosul fell to the Islamic State, we helped the Iraqi government build back up to take back Mosul. And I feel like, could that work the same way with the Kurds if we were to just let them keep that territory? It's more of, would you rather have the Assad regime, a regime that literally bombs their own people with a nerve gas to keep that territory?
I'm not sure that's actually been proven, frankly, but I mean, like I said, I personally think they should have their own state, but that's an unbelievably complex diplomatic question. Because, I mean, what you're suggesting is breaking off territory from Russian allies. I mean, Russia's surely going to have something to say about that, So it's, and Turkey as well, man. I don't know if the United States has the authority to start carving off territory from NATO allies. So it's an insanely complicated question, man. I mean, like I said, I personally would like them to have their own state, but it would take decades and huge amounts of diplomatic action to get to that point. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Okay. So my first question is more for clarification, if anything else. Do you think that censorship should be banned completely from every platform?
Censorship.
Oh, is that what I said? Censorship should be banned completely from every platform.
I don't know if there is such a thing as banning censorship, but I think that, I mean, unironically, I have to say that Mark Zuckerberg's right. We should be definitely looking towards trending towards free expression, which is something he said, which I'm genuinely surprised at, because it's the total opposite of something like Tim Cook or the Google executives were saying after Trump was elected. So, but yes, I think that we need far less censorship and more free speech.
And then have you also both of you guys are saying that you've been censored, you feel silenced and stuff like that. But have you guys ever reflected on what it is you're saying and why it's being banned or censored? If you're offending people with anti-gay, anti-feminist, or whatever you guys are saying on your videos that I can't see anymore, have you ever thought about why that's happening? And that, aside from political views.
I don't think offense is a good enough reason to censor someone.
That can also that can also lead to violence, because if you say something on your channel that offends someone, then it goes back and forth in the comments and then it can turn violent really quickly.
But the person who commits violence is not my responsibility, it's their responsibility.
That's what I was going to say.
But if it's a reaction to what you're saying, I feel like...
Yeah, but what you're suggesting is they're automatons. They're not people with agency and responsibility of their own. I have a right to say what I like, and I don't incite violence, so I don't get deplatformed. So if anyone does anything from that point onwards, that's their responsibility. It's not my responsibility. They have agency and they have action, and I don't think it's right to take that away from them.
Okay.
Hi, I don't really know either of you, but I came because I was interested in seeing what you guys were talking about. My question is actually for Hunter. So I noticed that in your video, your introduction video, you had said something, there was a gray mask with the watermelon, and you kind of it's not what it looks like, or you had said that you know, you had helped the LGBT community more than whoever the other girl was or something like that, and that you like tell the truth about Black people. So I wanted to know, because I don't know those videos, what it is that you were actually talking about in the videos, or like how you feel like you've actually helped the LGBTQ community, or like what that truth was that you were saying about Black people.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my content is, so someone else earlier was talking about edgy humor and edgy content. I also really like edgy content. So I usually like to present my ideas with like an edgier skit at the beginning. So that video, The Truth About Black People, I titled it that because I knew it would be inflammatory, and I knew that people would really be shocked and kind of have to click on it to see what it's all about. But when you actually get into the meat of the video, I was actually debunking some pretty common race realist myths that are peddled by like alt-right people who basically argue that low IQs in Black people is due to race and genetics. Very controversial and very kind of like defunct science, to be honest. So that's actually what that video was. It was actually going after the people who are against Black people, but I presented in a way that still kind of takes that inflammatory approach, because that's kind of how my brand
It's
is.
fun, that's why.
It is fun.
It's fun to push boundaries. But these are the same reasons that I've been banned from Patreon and Twitter. Like, I was going after the Nazis, but using words that were naughty. And because it's funny, come on.
It is fun.
Yeah, because. Yeah, I guess a lot of things are funny, but I guess I feel like you guys were joking about lynching and stuff like that was also funny in the crowd and stuff.
Who was joking about
but
lynching?
That being said, you know, I feel like you guys are just kind of using the word lynching and be like, ah, ha, 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 it's a
But
joke.
why can't that be
But-
funny? Why can't that be funny?
Because you can't understand it because you're not Black. But that's not my question. That's not my question.
Hang on. Don't give me a racial. Don't you cite your racial privilege to me.
My racial privilege?
Black people are not the only people who have been lynched.
I'm American,
Yeah, and I'm English.
right? So
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't give me that, right? Do you know how many peasants in England got lynched? No, you do not.
So then why would you be laughing about it?
Because I don't want it to have power over my life.
I guess.
It's just words.
Who was joking about lynching, though?
I don't know.
Just
I
out
don't
of
actually think we
curiosity.
were. But in principle, let's assume we were. You know, why do you want someone else's words to control your life?
I mean, Joe, like we're not getting, like, if you sat down and watched like The Office, they have like racist jokes in that every now and then. Like, no one's complaining about that. I feel like jokes are. I've said this about LGBT people as well, and I mean,
Oh yeah, just
Any
finish
ki-
the other LGBTQ question too.
I'll get to that too. Don't worry. But I think that trying to protect any minority group from jokes is the opposite of equality. So if LGBT people the LGBT community wants to be treated as equals. So I will make fun of the LGBT community just like I'll make fun of white people, Black people, Asian people, and everyone else.
Totally agree.
So that's what equality is. Equality means being treated like an equal member of society. And our society makes jokes about people. Our society makes jokes at people's
You
expense.
see that guy with the Sargon pillow over there? Man, I am going to rip him when we get out of this. Like, he's not going to be left alone because he's white. You know what I mean? And the thing is, if I wouldn't do something like that too, if I wouldn't like have joke with you, then I would be saying, look, you're actually not valid. You know, because what I'm saying is what he is valid. I would be treating you different on account of your race, treating you as inferiors if you can't take a joke like he can take a joke. And I think that's wrong, man.
I don't think that'd be appropriate. I think
Yeah,
that would be racist.
I think that's racist. You know? Because, one of the things you got to understand is that what we're talking about here is something in England we call banter, right? It's, you know, it's ribbing. It's a way, incidentally, of validating what the thing is, because you can't have the joke without the existence of the thing. And so you need that thing to exist if you want to share a joke. And the joke goes backwards, you know, it goes back and forth. You've got banter either way. This is how, after literally 1,000 years of the English, the Irish, the Scots, and the Welsh living next to each other, right, after 1,000 years, we don't have violence anymore. We don't have ethnic violence. There used to be, like all through the Middle Ages, you get the Scots coming down and taking slaves, English slaves, back to Scotland. And then you'd have to raise up a giant army of English peasants armed with pitchforks to go fight off these kilt-wearing haggis eaters, right? But then they'll say something and they'll be like, oh my God, that's ethnic humor against the Scots. And then they'll say something back against the English. And then the Welsh will get involved and we'll have to say, shut up or we'll enslave you again. You know, like it's all a bunch of banter and it validates the existence of these people because without that, who am I insulting?
Okay, that's a good answer. Oh,
Thank you.
In answer, I think I'm forgetting who your viewers are and that I'm not your viewers. You know what I'm saying?
That's okay. You could be.
No. That's why I think that's why I'm not understanding.
No.
You know, that's why I'm not. Understanding you. But okay, thank you for your answer.
But that's the point, isn't it? Like it's not out of hatred that jokes come, you know.
It's just that I don't think it's funny, so I wouldn't watch. You know
Well,
what I'm
that's
saying?
okay, yeah.
But that's you know
Yeah,
why.
but that's
where
the
I-
yeah, but that's freedom, isn't it? You know, you don't have to watch. You know.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So I think we all know that the vote is the means of representing, the average person in the democratic process. And, if people didn't have a vote in the democratic process, they would probably represent themselves through more violent means.
What other way is there?
Yeah. But what happens when money isn't represented in a government? Because I've noticed that when money isn't formally represented in a government, there's bribery, or I guess political donations. You also have much more violent cases where they'll just hire mercenaries to take over the government, or they'll pull a coup like with Pinochet. So do you think, like, in light of things like Brexit, where you see the process being held up by oligarchs who have money to spend, do you think we need to actually represent money in our governments before they decide to go postal with it?
I don't think money has ever not been represented in governments. That's honestly a lot of the point of being at the top is to gain wealth, and wealth naturally accumulates there. And I don't think it can be separated, to be honest.
Oh yeah, sure. Why not? Hunter, I noticed something in your intro video that you said that not vaccinating your children is child abuse. Now, I feel like there's an implication with that statement that for parents who don't vaccinate their children, you'd be willing to Waco them.
Willing to what? That's not the implication I was making.
I'm exaggerating. I'm just
Maybe you should extract it a bit more so Hunter
Can
can
we
follow
censor
you.
this guy? I'm sorry.
Well, I just feel like when you're saying that it's child abuse, you sort of want to take away their kids. And I mean, maybe it's through a peaceful process. You go to their house and politely ask, hey, may I have your kids? You're not vaccinating them with this drug, so may we please either have them vaccinated or take them away from you? I feel like that would get a very bad reaction. It's
But
just
can't-
hypothetical.
Can't he just think that that's really stupid and these people are
Yeah,
bad?
I mean, that's kind of where it ends there. It was meant to be an inflammatory statement. However, I do think that parents who refuse to vaccinate their children, that is child abuse. Because, I mean, look at the data. A lot of these anti-vaxxer myths are complete BS. I actually recently did a video on anti-vaxxers and successfully managed to trigger a bunch of conservatives actually who follow me because they could not believe I would be pro-vaccine. Even though if you look at the data, if you read through the anti-vaxxers' claims, most, if not all of them, are completely ridiculous and not founded on any real data.
Full disclosure of my bias, I take vaccines.
There you go. We can hang out then. No polio for you.
Oh, no. Okay, so bear with me here. This is kind of a long one, but I, like you, like to express my beliefs using humor, and when I try to insult people I disagree with in a polite way, I usually like to combine the humor of Blazing Saddles or Married with Children. And that's usually where I like to base my jokes. So my problem for me as a student, and if I make law review next year, because I'll be a second-year law student next year, I want to write an article about this. Freedom of speech and freedom from consequences. How much of the former, or how much of the latter do you meaningfully need for the former to be meaningful? And I say this because as a conservative student, I often feel like the repercussions I would face for expressing my beliefs would be such that my professors would look at me in a biased way, possibly cut down my grades, maybe give me bad recommendations, or my employers might hear that I'm conservative and they might judge me negatively for that. So in effect, my mom says, take all of those known consequences or possible consequences and basically have like a gag rule on yourself to have your beliefs but never express them. And she's so serious about this, I had to lie to her about about where I am right now. I told her I was just at a Federalist Society meeting, but not that I was meeting with you two.
Honestly, it may as well be though. I mean, let's be honest. But so there's the purpose behind freedom of speech is to prevent legal consequences, fundamentally. But there is a very strong argument to say that look, the more social consequences that begin to accrue, the more difficult society becomes to live in, and the more intolerant it becomes. I mean, the whole, like 90% of On Liberty by John Stuart Mill is not arguing against government censorship. It's arguing against social censorship, as in the censure of the other people in society, saying, well, look, you know, if we can't speak, even if the government isn't the one arresting me, if I can't get a job, if I can't get a house, if I can't have a bank account or whatever it is, you know, then I'm still not free. But you can say, well, there's a reasonable line that's going to have to be drawn there. And the question is, where do we draw it? Now, I'm of the opinion that we draw it quite far out to the free speech zone, but I appreciate that that's never going to be a perfect solution, but it's a conversation that we have to have. And the only problem, though, is it requires some sort of good faith dialogue on the part of the people who are going to be offended by this. And if you've got a communist professor, don't expect much good faith. So it really is down to your personal position in your life and your context. But ideally, I think that we should have more personal freedom in that regard. But there's not really a lot we can do other than have it being a kind of zeitgeist that infests an area, that occupies an area, and that, you know, is the kind of general theme by which we live.
Okay, and this is a specific question for Hunter. It's okay, I can talk loud enough that he can hear me. When are we gonna have more episodes and more experiences of the dad and Fem's son? You did one episode about it as like a teaser, and then I was expecting more. Are there gonna be any more episodes of dad and Fem's son?
There will be more. Don't worry, there will be more. I assure you guys, there will be more.
And this is the last one, so.
All right, Carl and Hunter, welcome to Penn State. My question is actually directly to you, Hunter. You're here on stage on a platform with Carl Benjamin. Are you aware of comments that Carl Benjamin made about a British member of Parliament in raping
I
her?
am somewhat aware, but I also think that the comments were greatly taken out of context.
You can disavow if you like.
And I know that what you were getting at was like a self-aware joke. However, I'm also able to see why a lot of, you know, cuckoo little lefties might get a little triggered by what he said.
Honestly, that was entirely the point.
Don't you think that's absolutely disgusting, and you should just completely disavow and not associate yourself with this man?
I mean, yeah, sure.
I don't know how you feel comfortable being on stage with this guy. Yeah,
Disavow.
yeah. What about
Sure,
this?
I did.
Just cut your losses, disavow.
Right.
I disavow,
mean,
you know.
What about the pedophile comments?
What about which one?
The pedophile comments and the age of consent should be
So
up
are you
to
gonna
each
ask me to
child.
disavow every like individual
No,
comment
but,
Sargon's made that you don't like?
The thing is, he doesn't know what I said, right? So he doesn't
What
know.
did you actually say? Do you want to?
So I was talking to a victim of pedophilia. Right?
I'm asking what Hunter.
Yeah, I know.
But I haven't
But he's
really-
asking me a question, and I'm not answering your question, buddy. I'm not answering. He's just asked me a question. He's asked me a question. He wants an answer.
I wanted to know what his comments were in full, so that I can decide to disavow them or not. For you.
So I was sprung with the surprise that I was talking to a victim of pedophilia back in 2014. I didn't really know what to do. And I didn't really want to tell them that, look, I think you're the victim, because a lot of these people, and Milo's the same actually, they think that they're the ones who initiate it, right? And it's very difficult because you realize that a lot of their own emotional sort of ego is built on the idea that, no, and just like you, I'm not a victim, right? I'm not a victim. And so they sit there and go, well, I've got all of these justifications for why I'm not a victim. And when that's sprung on you, you think, well, Christ, what can I do? What am I going to do? Am I going to make this guy break down in tears? And so I gave the most charitable response I could. It's like, well, there have been civilizations that have had relationships, like ancient Greeks, things like this. And eventually I changed the subject as quickly as possible. I think that's what he's talking about. But I was on the other side of that, because what you're ignoring is that at minute 19 of that stream, I said that the age of consent should be 16. Why are you leaving that out?
Why you what?
Why are you leaving that out? Because you didn't know, did you? You didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know. Just admit you didn't know.
Dude, no, you're
just admit you didn't know.
What you're doing is you're trying to ask me a question to get at Sargon. Listen, I don't know the full context to the past comments Sargon's made. We happen to be in a similar genre of content that we create on YouTube together. If you have a question for me specifically, I'd be happy to answer it, but I'm not going to sit here and answer questions about other people sitting next to me when you could just be asking Sargon these questions.
But you didn't know, did you? Because it's easier to fool a man. It's easier to fool a man than to persuade him that he has been fooled. You have been fooled, sir. See? Look here.
Hold on, wait. I think he just beat us in the argument because he rolled his eyes.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I'd be happily to stand here all night. You'll sit here all night,
Okay. I just want to say, Hunter, I've been a big fan for years now, and I want to thank you personally for red pilling me.
There you go.
Keep fighting. You're making a difference. So I wanted to ask about something that I believe affects the majority of students in this room, which is academic censorship. It was touched on before, and it'll be especially relevant when I start my 10-page paper that I probably should have started about a week ago. But as a conservative, and there have been studies done that have shown that conservatives who express their viewpoints in their assignments tend to receive lower grades. I was wondering if you had any advice or any opinions you'd like to share on that topic, and anything that might be able to help me out.
Sure. Well, what I would say is you're absolutely correct. There is certainly an issue with conservative censorship on college campuses. I also know there was another study that found, I think it was 98% of professors leaned left. It was majority of the professors on college campuses lean left. So you're absolutely correct in the notion that academic conservative censorship exists. What I would recommend you do is never shut up. That would be my first tip, is never shut up, because the left, they use these tactics like the lower grades and the intimidation to try and get you to shut up. So if you shut up, then you've essentially validated their tactics to censor you. So And when I say, don't shut up, I'm not saying run around spouting everywhere, oh, I like Trump, Trump's the best, or whatever, but do so respectfully.
Although maybe.
And don't let yourself be intimidated by the leftist tactics, because if you, along with other conservative students, refuse to be intimidated by these tactics, then I think that you will begin to sort of turn that around a little bit.
So one of the best examples of what you're talking about is a professor called Peter Boghossian. He's a professor of philosophy at Portland. You can imagine how he gets treated when he says, "Wait a minute, social justice is cancer. This is really bad stuff." And it's it's the way that Douglas Murray puts it. It's an entirely new metaphysic. It's a new way of viewing what is right and wrong. And he has been systematically ground out of the political of the academic process, to the point where when I went to speak at Portland, his office had been moved for suspicious reasons. I can't remember what the exact reason was. Oh, sorry, there's a leak in your office. Yeah, no, exactly, not quite that bad, but I mean, yeah, it'd be, oh, well, the paperwork says, this rule says there's a leak here. And so basically his office had been moved to a storage room in the basement in Portland, and I was just like, "Is this your office?" And he was like, "Yeah." They're screwing me. And it's like, it happens, man. It absolutely happens. And they're very litigious. They're very legalistic. They'll use every excuse and every rule that they can to effectively box you in and get rid of you.
Thank you. One more.
I was at the Straight Pride Parade along with those clowns. So
I'm definitely going to try and attend next year, man. I tell you.
Yeah. So I ended up in the pictures in several newspapers, and a lot of my friends, my family, and people at work, they all congratulated me, and they supported that I was actually in the newspaper. But there were 3 friends that I have who said things like, I should end up losing my job for being there. They said I'm a Nazi. They said I should have no friends, and other more serious things. Essentially, what they were advocating was something like total social ostracization. So wouldn't that be a scary concept that anyone who wears a Trump hat, waves an American flag, or goes to the Straight Pride Parade is called a Nazi and is totally ostracized from society? That's a little bit more serious than what the other person said earlier about her grades in class, just because of her beliefs. And what do you think of all that?
I think it's very compassionate to advocate ostracization. It's honestly the worst thing you can do to a human being, and they know it. That's why they advocate it. Failing short of actual violence to a person, ostracizing someone is the most hideous thing you can do. This is one of the reasons why censorship, especially online censorship, is so bad. People are wondering why are people like Milo getting so radical? Well, why do you think? You know, he's been effectively kicked out of society because he's a jokester on the internet. And it really is the sort of thing that is making the alt-right turn into shooters. There have been 3 mass shootings from the alt-right now against Muslims and Jews, and I think these are probably going to continue. That's not an endorsement. That's a sad prediction, because these people are just being sliced off of social media platforms. I mean, Red Ice TV was taken down the other day. I've got no love for Red Ice TV, but I don't think they actually broke the rules. I'm aware from various people that I've spoken to that they actually go out of their way to do exactly what you say and stay very much within the narrow confines that the terms of service say. But it didn't matter, they got removed. This is what's driving them to violence, because when you don't have speech, you've only got one other option. But I tell you what, the Straight Pride Parade is the best troll that I've ever seen.
It was an excellent troll.
And but the scope of it is incredible, because the page is Super Happy Fun America. It's only like 5,000 followers, right? But celebrities, politicians, mega corporations are like, this Straight Pride Parade's wrong. Why are you even giving it the time of day? I mean, the guy's dressed in the clown suit. He's got a Sargon pillow. Like, why are you the enemy to them, you know? So there must have been something to it. And I agree. I side with the oppressed majority in this regard. The poor straight people, we just can't catch a break. We need Straight Pride Month. That's what we need.
There you go.
Big round of applause, Sargon Hunter. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. I'll be done in a second. I'll just keep that then. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys. Amazing job. So happy to see everyone come out. I want to thank everyone that did come out. We had a huge list of donors that came out. I'll read their names real quickly because we really appreciate all their donations. They made this, our club, bigger and better than ever before. Benjamin Strada, Kyle Zimmerman, Kyle Marto, Justin Valentine, Dane Robinson, Jasper Can, Nicholas Ferrette, Nathan Resler, Jesse Wallach, and Jacob Ralston, Megan McConnell, Muhammad Atlantic, Joe Hogg, I'm going to pronounce all these names wrong, Robert Dixon, Christopher Jordan, Richard Spunyabarger, Mario Monte, and Chase Mattern. Thank you so much for your generous donations. You guys are amazing. Absolutely amazing. And special thanks to Jesse Walk right here, who donated $190.05. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, he's amazing. I can't believe, like, when I saw that number, it just, like, blew everything through the roof. You're amazing, man. Thanks. And we're going to announce right now the 2 people that win the exclusive dinner right now. I picked the random names because, number 1, the referrals were an even number, and that's what we also agreed to do with the donors. So Chase Mattern
and Kyle Zimmerman. Are you two here? Darn. Okay. We'll figure something out with the exec board a little bit later. So we'll see what we can do. That's great. So, and by the way, everybody that's the super VIP that's going to do the meet and greet, we all have to exit the room first before we do that. So every single person in here, doesn't matter what ticket you have to exit the room first, and then we'll come back and do that. If you're a super VIP, meet up outside where we lined up for the event. Just go right there, congregate, and we'll bring you guys back in when we're ready for that. And I'd also like to give a super special thank you to our board members, Trevor Grimm, Brittany Diver, and Tyree Farouk, and our field rep 7. I wasn't going to forget you. You guys are amazing. You guys made this possible. And of course, we got to thank President Trump. He came out in support of us this week. So, yeah. And of course, thanks to all of you who came out. We packed the house. Great job. We showed these people outside that free speech is still popular. It's still fun. It's still cool. And it's the best thing ever for civil dialogue. So thank you guys so much. Last two thank yous are important ones. Thank you, Penn State. That statement, we probably had some disagreements with it, but at the end of the day, they did say in support of free speech. So thank you to Penn State for letting us still have this event, because people wanted to shut it down. Yeah. I'm just happy it's still happening, because I thought it was a great discussion. And of course, biggest thank you to the College Democrats for the free advertising. Thank you so much. I'm your biggest fan. And we'll move Finland store next semester. So thank you everyone for coming out to this event.